So, long time no see. As you've probably noticed, or maybe haven't noticed, I haven't been around much in the last few weeks, and that's just because it's about to be my last month at university and I really just want to focus on that. So I think I'm just going to make monthly wrap-ups for the end of March and the end of April, and then when all of my assignments are due in the first week of May, hopefully after that I can get back to making videos a lot more regularly. In March I managed to read 3 books and 1 volume of a comic book. So the first thing that I read in March was The Complete Fairy Tales by Charles Perrault, and this is basically a collection of fairy tales in the original-ish version. I found the poems really interesting because those were ones that have kind of been lost to our society now, and probably for good reason, because the first one was very sexist. The other fairy tales are very interesting because it's just fun to see what aspects of the stories that we know have always been the same and which aspects have been changed and which are completely different or taken out. If you're interested in fairy tales and where they come from, then I would definitely recommend this. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The second thing that I read was the second volume of Black Widow, and this is called The Tightly Tangled Web. It was written by Nathan Edmondson and the art was done by Phil Noto. So this is obviously a continuation of the first volume of the Black Widow comic. Phil Noto's artwork is still amazing and on point and just absolutely beautiful. The storyline itself is where I feel that this collection is quite weak, as well as the first volume. There's just something about it that isn't really capturing my attention that much, even though I love Natasha as a character. That's what's keeping me going rather than the actual story. One thing that I got really excited about with this volume was the fact that there were a lot of cameos in it. So there were people like the Winter Soldier and Hawkeye involved, and a character called X-23 who I've never read about in a comic before. I don't know anything about her, but I really enjoyed the issue with her in it, so that was a nice surprise. The part that I didn't like was the storyline with... who was it? The storyline with the Punisher. I just didn't really have much interest in that, and it felt kind of like the story was being told again but from his perspective, so it felt a little bit forced and unnecessary. I don't know, I just didn't really like that part. When I do reviews for the Black Widow comics, I always want to give the art 5 stars and the story 3 stars, but I'm going to give this one 3 out of 5 stars overall. The third thing that I read was Wild Seed by Octavia E. Butler. This is the first book in the Pattern Master sci-fi series, and it is basically about 2 people who are immortal and have these special powers. And Anyanwu is very powerful, and Doro kind of covets this power, and he basically breeds these people with these special abilities to get even more powerful children from them. And when he feels Anyanwu's power, he thinks he has to take her and keep her as somebody to breed from, basically. So basically, Doro abducts Anyanwu from her community in West Africa and takes her over to his own little community in the United States. And the most interesting thing about this book for me, I think, was the power struggle between Doro and Anyanwu, because the relationship is very, very complex, and at times I had problems with this because it was very unhealthy. Obviously, from the premise that I've given, it's an unhealthy relationship. But there are moments when there's this kind of complexity to both of the characters that makes their relationship so interesting. For me, this was one of those books where as soon as you start reading, you kind of get immersed in that world straight away, and it just takes no work whatsoever. The writing was really good in that sense, and I really want to see where it's going to go next. Overall, I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. And finally, I have caught up with the A Song of Ice and Fire series. So I just finished A Dance with Dragons After the Feast, which is part 2 of the 5th book, and yeah, I'm all caught up now. Oh, wow, I kind of like that. but that's not what I wanted. Okay. After reading this one, I've realised that the longer books in the series, I have mixed feelings about these ones because pacing in the first half is very, very, very slow, or at least in my opinion it just felt very slow, and then in the second part things really pick up and get really exciting, and I've really enjoyed those parts. So I really enjoyed this book, but I didn't really enjoy the first part of A Dance with Dragons. One thing that I have noticed after reading the whole of this series is that a lot of the time it does feel very repetitive, and I always wonder whether it could be cut down, because there's sometimes when I read a sentence and then in the next paragraph there'll be a very, very similar sentence that says the exact same thing, and I just think, how often does this happen in this book? Because George R.R. Martin is juggling so many characters that he kind of has to remind you of their mindset and get you back into that way of thinking. To do that, he kind of repeats a lot of what he said before in other chapters, and I just wonder whether it could be cut down any further. Now that I've caught up with the series, I am getting quite frustrated about the lack of answers to the questions that George R.R. Martin has raised. Never mind, hopefully in the next book there will be a lot more answers and explanations to things. All in all, I gave this one in particular a 4 out of 5 stars. I think if I was going to rate the A Dance with Dragons book as a whole, I would give it 3 stars to kind of balance out the 2 and the 4 that I gave to the 2 halves. And yes, it remains entertaining. That's all that I read in March. I'm currently reading this very old collection of Sylvia Plath poetry, and this was so old that when I got it out of the library it wasn't actually on the system, so it beeped as I walked out and it was very embarrassing and I had to go back to the desk. And I've never read any Sylvia Plath before, but her name has always been one that has stood out to me and that I've wanted to read. I think Lorelei is my favourite so far. I'm also reading Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury and I'm enjoying that so far. So because I don't have a lot to talk about this month really, I thought that I would just tack on a few favourites onto the end of this video. During March I went on a Sims kick and I promised myself that I would not download The Sims 3 or The Sims 4 before I graduated, because I know how much of a huge distraction it can be. And I kind of failed because I started watching Sims 3 videos on YouTube and then it spiraled and I ended up downloading The Sims 3. I won't let myself buy Sims 4 yet though, so that's going to be an after graduation treat. Another favourite has been the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. I have not laughed at a TV show that hard for such a long time. It's so funny and it's perfect to watch in the morning. I always watch one episode in the morning with my breakfast because it just sets me up for the day and makes me happy. I love Kimmy Schmidt. As for my music favourite this week, I would say that would be Echo Smith's album, because it was one of those moments when you listen to an album and you're kind of expecting that there'll be 1 or 2 songs that you don't like and you kind of hate, but you get to the end of it and you realise actually all of these songs are kind of on point and I love them all. So that was my March. Again, I'll apologise for not being around very much for the past few weeks. April is my birthday month. My birthday's on the 5th of April, so I'm excited because I'll be able to sing 22 by Taylor Swift and it makes sense. That's the end of this video. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye!